Hello again and welcome to another 140k Imperial Guard Tactics video, and today guys I am super excited to be talking about the list that I'm going to be taking to the upcoming Allies of Convenience team tournament that's taking place this weekend. Bit of a strange format. It's going to be like an 8-man teams tournament, so loads of opportunities for crazy matchups and all this kind of stuff. Really looking forward to it, really excited about it. It's really got my juices flowing for the 40k again. Sometimes you just need to throw yourself headfirst into a tournament to get your love for the game back, and that's what I'm doing with this list, and that's what I'm doing at this event. So I decided with this list, it was not immediately obvious, I'm just going to come out and say it, it's 365 models. All-time new record number of models that I am running in a list. Previous high was something like 280, I believe, around the sort of beginning of 8th, end of 7th. That was where I was at. And obviously, of course, in the good old days of 5th and 6th edition, when you had never-ending waves of conscripts, literally every unit of conscripts could come back for free. I would happily run 200 plus models because many of them came back. But this is an all-time new record for me. 365 models. Now in the picture that you see here, there's the main picture, there's 364. That's just because at the time of taking this picture, I had 35 points left over and I wasn't quite sure what I was going to spend it on, but I will go through in detail what I spent those last 35 points on and what I spent the whole 2,000 points on for this list. So, it's a crazy list. It's a crazy list, but I think it might just work. Let's not beat around the bush though, guys. It is a bit of a meme list, okay? It's 360 conscripts and 5 officers, okay? It's a bit of a meme list. I have actually talked about this list in a previous video, but it was more of a general thinking and feeling list on it. It wasn't specifics and tactics and actually real life logistics of how the hell I'm going to operate this mad list. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Bit of detail, bit more depth. What nuances have I added to this crazy thing? But like I said, it's a bit of a meme list. So first thing to mention is, why did I, before we even get into this, why did I put this thing together? Well, firstly, it's one that is possible on paper. And whilst it's good to do things on paper, in reality, it's always better to take things to the field and see how it works. Is there a real chance I'm going to time out every game with this thing? Yeah, you betcha there is. But this is 9th edition. At the end of the day, I don't think this list has any greater chance of timing out than any other list, because my list is, whilst there's a lot of models, is super simple. It's one unit type. I have one gun type in the whole army. I got las pistols on the officers as well, but I got one gun type, las rifle. There's no special rules or anything. So whilst I have had other armies, and there's other armies out there which are vastly more complicated, whose opening turns and deployments and all that kind of stuff and psychic phases and all that take a huge amount of time. Ironically, I don't think this list is going to take that much longer to operate. We'll have to see. Maybe I'll do the tournament report and I'll be eating humble pie. But I think that this list won't take any longer than any other list that I've piloted with the extra steps that I've taken. There's plenty of people who play 40k who have to talk out the end of games, and they're not running this kind of list. So that's just where we are with 9th edition, I guess. Anyway, moving on. That's why. So it was a theory list. I want to make it a reality, and at the end of the day, there's nothing quite like turning up to an event and just throwing endless waves of infantry at your opponent. Every single just man, woman, and child conscripted into the army and just thrown at the enemy, and the game will break before the guard did. That's the kind of approach, and it's fun. Third reason, it's fun. If I time out every game, I don't care. If I lose every game, I don't care. I'm going to have unbelievable amounts of fun with this list. If it becomes obvious after game sort of 1 or game 2 that it just doesn't work and you need something other than lasguns to actually achieve victory, then I'm going to go full meme for the rest of the event. And I'm going to report back on that, and I'm going to say I just had fun. And that's absolutely fine, because at the end of the day, it's very easy for one to get worked up about 40k. It's very easy for one to get salty and to start giving up on this crazy thing this crazy hobby that we love. But at the end of the day, you should play what you find fun. And I find this idea fun. And I'm sure that my opponents, whilst they may groan when they see the list, will admit that it is nothing if not a fun, memey, thematic list. So that's all the reasons why I took the list. And now let's get into the actual list itself. Now, you might say, Morning Glory, you've waffled on for like 5 minutes. You've not even talked about what's on the list. It's going to take about 1 minute, well, maybe 2. I don't want someone to actually time me on this, to actually explain what's on the list. But it's really, really simple, okay? It's 2 detachments. They're both battalions, okay? In each battalion, I've got 6 units of maxed out conscripts. So that is 180 conscripts per detachment, 360 conscripts in total, okay? All of these conscripts have been upgraded using the White Shield stratagem. The White Shield stratagem is from the Cadian supplement in Octarius' book Rising Tide. And basically, if you have 5 or more units of conscripts in a detachment, then it costs 3 CP to make them more White Shields. It's a pre-game stratagem, so you can spend it more than once before the beginning of the game, so you can upgrade 2 detachments with White Shields, which is what I've done. So every single conscript has been upgraded to a White Shield, which has cost me 6 CP. 3 for each attachment. So I have 360 upgraded, 360 White Shields. It cost me no extra points, it just cost me CP. Right? Leading each one of these detachments is, in detachment number 1, is Lord Castellan Creed and a company commander. The company commander is my warlord, and he has got the gifted commander trait, I should say. Leading the other detachment is 2 regular company commanders, and one of those has got my relic, which is the dagger of Tusaka, and the other one is just bare bones. Though in terms of their equipment, they're all bare bones. Last pistol, chainsword, Creed comes with what he comes with. That takes me to about 1965 points. I had 35 points left over. I debated on what I was going to put in this. At first, I thought maybe a massive ordnance, but then I realised, well, it doesn't really do much after that one-shot basilisk. Then I thought, well, with this number of conscripts, you've got to have a commissar, right? But then I realised that commissar was literally adding nothing. He just, leadership 9 means nothing in this list. It's simply a thematic upgrade. Whilst cool, this list is already as themed as it needs to be. So I thought, you know what? I'll take a platoon commander. Because at the end of the day, especially if I'm going to be outflanking some units, which we'll talk about in a second, I actually do need plenty of orders in this list. And at the end of the day, having an extra order is going to do me better, especially with lots of moving, than having a leadership 9 buff near some people. So that's what I went for. Now, in terms of how the list is, so that's the list. It's 5 officers, 360 infantry, 365 models in total. There we go. What is the tactics that I'm going to be employing with this list? Well, apart from just sending the next wave, not the actual Valhalla stratagem, just the concept of it, apart from just throwing waves and waves of men at this at the enemy, this list is actually going to operate on essentially, I'm going to sit on as many primary objectives as possible for as long as possible. I have 360 infantry. Even in a 6 objective game, I can put 60 infantry on each objective. In a 5 objective game, I get to put even more than that on. Okay? So I can literally just go, there's an objective, there's an objective, there's an objective, blah, 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 blah. There's a column of 60, there's a column of 60, there's a column of 60, off you go. So I'm just going to sit on as many objectives as possible, deny as many objectives as possible, leverage move as much as possible, and that's how I'm going to interact with the primaries. Just overwhelm them. Second thing that I want to mention is that in terms of secondaries, then there's a few options that I have. Of course, I've got engage all fronts. This list is actually quite good at engaging all fronts because it can just, well, we'll get to that in a second. I've also got retrieve Nachman data. This list is again perfectly fine, perfectly happy to retrieve some Nachman data. And then I actually have Stranglehold. This list is good for strangling, good for Stranglehold, because I will very, very likely be holding more objectives than my opponent every single turn. And Raise the Banners is a legitimate backup option. If I can get onto 3 banners and then just keep running past those objectives and the enemy just can't get near them, then I'll do that. I'll score max on banners. And last but not least, little ace up the hole, ace in the sleeve, whatever you want to call it. It's ace up my sleeve, trick up my sleeve, ace in the hole, whatever you want to call it, to the last. This was actually, I was put onto this by, I can't remember what his name is, but there's a chap that took a very similar list to this, the Dallas Open, and he also took a similar list to this at the beginning of 9th edition. And he went 6-2 at Dallas Open with a list like this. His is actually more nuanced than mine, and I think his is actually better than my list. His is actually 300 conscripts and then some units like Scions to score certain objectives and stuff, which is, I think his list is better than mine for that. But what I would say is that he put me onto the idea of to the last. Because what you can do is you can make 3 units of conscripts your to the last units, and then you can put them in reserve. And you can put them in reserve using the gifted commander warlord trait, which then means that your opponent only has potentially turns 4 and turn 5 to actually kill your 90 to the last conscript. And if they don't kill them all, if one conscript stays alive, he saves, he stops you from scoring. The enemy from stopping from scoring to the last. So that's actually a really cool little tactic in terms of secondaries that I think I'll pick that depending on what I'm facing. If I'm facing an army which is really likely to screen me out on the flanks and whatnot, then I'm more than likely going to pick Stranglehold, Banners, and to the last. Something like that. Because I'm basically just going to stay in my half of the board and just flood it with bodies, and I'll just do that then. If I'm facing someone who is unlikely to be able to stop me from outflanking, then, and again we'll come back to the flankers in a second, then I'm more likely to take things like to the last. No, not to the last. I'll swap to the last out for like Nachmund, and I'll probably swap out like Banners for engagement fronts, something like that. So that's kind of the general plan with primaries and secondaries. I keep talking about these flanking units, right? So with this list, I have the possibility of outflanking a minimum of 120 infantry and an officer. I have enough CP to be able to outflank another 2 squads of conscripts, maybe 3 squads of conscripts, and 3 officers, actually. So I can outflank a hell of a lot. But the plan is actually going to be that I'm going to outflank 120 infantry pretty much every game. And by outflanking, I mean put in strategic reserve. So how do I do that? So Gifted Commander is a Cadian Warlord trait that allows you to redeploy 3 units into, either redeploy them or put them into reserve for no CP. So that's probably what I'll do. Now you do have to set them up, but I shouldn't have a problem with setting them up. And any that I can't fit in, I've got 3 CP in the bag to be able to, it forces me to put them in strategic reserve, if that's what happens. I've also, so I can put 3 in reserve that way, I've also got my relic, the Dagger of Tusaka, good old Dagger of Tusaka. How many lists have I written with this relic in? It is my go-to relic. It allows you to outflank an officer and a unit. That's what it does. So I can outflank 120 infantry. Now my plan with the outflankers comes in 2 forms. Firstly, 3 forms, sorry. Firstly, I can do what I've already described, which is put them in reserve, not outflank them, keep them in reserve safe, make sure I don't forget, and then bring them in to the last points. That's risky. I could easily forget that. And then if my opponent's a knob, or I should say if my opponent is playing properly, then I just lose 15 points that way, which is really, really bad. The other option I've got is I can overload 1 flank. I can literally outflank 120 infantry into my opponent's flank. Now bear in mind, I've read strategic reserves rules, and bear in mind I can't outflank into my opponent's deployment zone turn 2, but I can turn 3 onwards. So that starts getting interesting for things like I could even, depending on the crazy situation I'm in, I could even start taking behind enemy lines, because a unit of conscripts and an officer in the enemy's deployment zone will net me 4 points a turn, I believe. I think you get 1 point, you get 2 points for 1 unit and 4 points for 2 units. So that's not a bad choice at all. Outflank turn 2 and turn 3, and then hopefully by turn 4, turn 5, I'll have some move units that can get up there as well and do the same thing. So overload 1 flank with like 120 infantry and just totally claim huge amounts of the board, or dilute myself a little bit and flank 60 on one side and 60 on the other. Now, I don't know which one will be better, and I think it will genuinely come down to where I can fit the guys in. And I think it will genuinely come down to where I feel I need to be making the most gains. The thing about reserves and the way I'm planning on using them is I'm kind of planning on using them late World War One style, where rather than, or sort of general World War One tactics, which obviously I'm doing with this list, but there's always a temptation to use reserves to help a place that is faltering. But often what you'll find is that your men will be able to delay the enemy long enough, and where you actually want to deploy reserves is where you're succeeding, and maybe just reinforce the flank if it's really struggling. So there's all sorts of nuances to it, and I think it's purely going to, hold my hands up, I haven't had many practice games with this. I've practiced at home in the battle bunker, just, moving models and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of actually playing against real opponents, I haven't had much chance with this. However, I do have about a decade's worth of pure infantry guard experience to draw upon, and a lot of that has been in 9th edition. So I do have general transferable knowledge, and I think essentially it's going to be, drawing upon that for this. Again, if the list is a total failure, total just shambles, it can't do anything, then I'll just be memeing it, and that's fine, and that's what I will report, and I will report back. This list is great, fun, but not good on the battlefield. Last thing to mention is real world. Second last thing to mention is not real world logistics. We'll get to that at the very end. Is what's my general game plan with this? Obviously, timings is a problem, and I've mentioned that at the beginning, but timings could be a problem with this. The idea with the list is essentially to take a lot of ground early on, speed bump the enemy as much as possible, and then be relatively selective with what I actually choose to shoot, because it's a lot of shots per squad, potentially 120 shots per squad, and if I'm not careful, I will time myself out just by the fact I've got to roll all those dice. I have got a dice app, but I'm going to suspect that most opponents are going to make me roll the dice. There's still a general fear of technology and dice apps and whatnot, and that's totally understandable. I'll ask if I can use it. It might make things a lot quicker, but I suspect a lot of people will go, no, don't use a dice app. Please roll the dice properly, which we'll get to in a second how I'm going to handle that. So that's just one thing to mention. What's my game plan is, like I said, move, take ground, and then just roll the dice as quickly as possible and just really focus on picking out the sixes for Hammer of the Emperor. Really focus on that. And hopefully that will be relatively quick. My orders are very simple. It's going to be move, 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 or it's going to be first rank fire, second rank fire. And that's basically where I'm at. That's my game plan. Just lasgun everything to death and tie up stuff that needs tying up and move on to as many objectives as possible. That's my game plan. Every turn. Deployment is going to be the same every turn. As many lines as conscripts as I can. Minimum of 3 lines of conscripts. Because probably the third line is going to get picked up and put in reserve. So, that is where we're at as the game plan. Real world logistics. Obviously a huge factor when building a list like this is making sure you don't time out. Making sure that you can physically transport it around the gaming hall, and make sure you can physically transport it to the venue, and making sure you can deploy it quickly. That's really the kicker, that last one. Okay? Because you can move these units around relatively quickly, even if you don't have any sort of movement trays or anything, by just shoving them forward, but actually transferring handfuls of models to a table will take, and setting them up will actually take a long time. So you need to have a way of literally fast deploying units, and that's what I've really focused on with this real world logistical support. So in terms of how I'm going to get the units there, I'm going to arrive to the venue early. I've got 2 large Citadel carry cases, which with the classic foam, not the new foam. The new foam takes ages to get models out because they're always falling over and that kind of stuff. Classic foam, 1 unit of conscripts per tray of foam. Easy peasy. I'm going to get there early. I'm going to set the models up on the trolley, and then they're going to be, and then the cases are going to basically go away, and I'm just going to use the trolley for everything for the rest of the day. So that's how I'm going to transport the models there. In terms of transported them around the venue, I've got the trolley. The trolley is, trays are so last year, okay? Trolley actually was £25. Not that expensive at all. And that was with Amazon Prime arriving next day and all that kind of stuff. You can get like foldable ones and stuff that I've seen, but they're really, really expensive. They're like 60 or 70 pounds, if not more. This is 25 quid from Amazon, and it's actually really sturdy. I spent about 2 hours researching which trolley I wanted to get, and I'm really glad I got this one. It's got a lip, it's got a solid base, and it can fit more than all the infantry on it, and it's just really, really good. So this is the trolley that I got. If I remember, I'll put it in the link to it in the description of this video. So that's the first bit. Trolley will allow me to move units around, and also will allow me to almost pre-set up my army on the trolley. So no having to get things out of foam and set them up on the board. Even having them selected in units on a tray wouldn't be enough. I've got the trolley and they're on movement trays. Movement trays are the second key aspect of this army, and they are key. The trolley is good for inter-game logistics and pre-game logistics. The movement trays are essential for in-game logistics. Okay, so the in-game logistics are deployment and movement. That's the key. That's the key to everything. Okay, now if I try and deploy a unit of 30 conscripts by hand, no movement trays, it takes me about 3 minutes to do that. Because I've got to get them over, and then I've got to set them up, and then I've got to make sure that they're all, the units aren't mingling into each other and that kind of stuff. With deploying them with the movement trays, each movement tray I've got has 10 men on them. So it's 3 movement trays per squad. I can transfer, again, I have tested this because I'm that sad at home. I have tested this. I can transfer each movement tray from the trolley to the board in about 10 to 15 seconds, so I can deploy each unit in about under a minute. Okay, so even with, you might say, oh, but what about thinking where the units are going to go? I'm not going to change my deployment. My deployment is set for every single game. Deploy units of conscripts in an equal line on the edge of my deployment zone. When the first line is filled, do the next line. When the second line is filled, do the next line. It's going to be really, really simple. I'm going to deploy them in blocks of 30. I'm just going to deploy them across. Now, more than likely, my deployment for the first line of conscripts is going to be a long line, and then after that, we're probably going to be looking at blocks of conscripts, so more like French columns. That's the way we're going to be looking at it. So the front line, so it'll take about 3 squads to cover the front line, and then after that, we're good to go. Just deploy them as and wherever I can fit them. But it's just going to be lines upon lines of conscripts. I'm just going to deploy them in the trays straight up. So it really cuts down deployment time, because I can literally pick 10 guys up, place them down, 10 guys up, place them down, 10 guys up, place them down. Done. Even with possible terrain issues, I can just twist, pivot, I can do whatever I need with the trays to just get them into place. In terms of stringing back to objectives, I can either just turn one of the trays so it's on its long ways rather than on its short ways, and that lets me, or I can literally take a few models out and conga line back with them if I need to. More than likely, I'll just go, there's 30 guys sat on this objective, they're not moving now. I won't mess around. I'm not going to mess around trying to get a few extra lasgun shots and stuff like that. I'm not going to worry about deployment. I'm not going to worry about lanes of fire. I'm always going to have some things that I can shoot at. I cover the whole board pretty much. So that's how we're looking there. The other thing with movement is obviously it significantly increases my actual movement speed. Again, picking up models one at a time or 2 or 3 at a time takes a long time. Now I can push forward, if on a flat battle map, because it's all going to be battle maps, I can push forward a unit of conscripts 6 inches in a couple of seconds. It's much, much quicker. So overall, these, the trolley allow me to pre-set up my army, and the movement trays allow me to deploy it about 30 seconds to a minute per squad. Happily will get my army deployed in time, and happily will be able to move the army around quickly on the tabletop. This army could be incredibly quick if I basically choose not to shoot anything. There will be certain games where shooting things is essentially irrelevant, and I'll only do it where it's, if I've got the luxury of doing it. Because there'll be certain armies which physically, even if every shot hits and every attack hits, won't table me, and that's fine. So that's where we're at with the real world logistics. That's where we're at now. Essentially, that's the army, guys. That's my game plan. I haven't just thrown it together as a meme and not thought it through. I've put a lot of time and effort into actually making this work. There is a comment, there is a bit of a read between the lines moment here of, if I have to do all this effort just to take an army, is that indicative of like, maybe the army is a bit hard to run? Possibly. There's also, underneath that line, you could say, if this is what people are having to do to go to 40k tournaments, maybe something's a bit wrong. Possibly. But not everyone has to do this. You know, this is not a salt video. So it's just, I guess you could argue it's the case for certain factions though, couldn't you? So there we go. How do I expect the army to do? No idea. It's team pairings, and the meta is so crazy at the moment that who knows what could happen. I think the list will always score well. I think cutting this list, cutting my teeth on this list in a team tournament is fantastic. It means that I will potentially get some favourable matchups, and it means also that I'll get a crash course with experience of using this list. But yeah, that's it, guys. What do you think? What do you think about this list? Is it crazy? Is it good? Do you think, what would you change about this list? Would you drop, how many conscripts would you drop, and what would you take instead? What do you think about this list versus taking all infantry squads instead? Which list do you think would win? Imagine if you had 18 infantry squads, which is half the amount of infantry. But then you've got things like, you know, 30 veterans on top of that, 3 squads of mortars, 3 command squads. You'd probably come out with about 250 blokes. Would you take 250 regulars over 360 conscripts? There's a question. I don't know. I worked both lists out, and I figured this one weirdly would be easier to run in game because I wouldn't have to roll lots of dice individually for heavy bolter shots and stuff like that. What do you think? Do you think it's you know, I mean, at the end of the day, when I was reading up on the guy that went 6 and 2, he said the thing that was vapor waving stuff was lasguns. So I was like, well, I guess I'll just take all lasguns then. What do you guys think? You know what would give this list a run for its money, I reckon? 180 land and line conscripts if they had Hammer for the Emperor. Because I'm not getting a save. I wouldn't even necessarily need land and line ones. You take 180... To say land and line conscripts, 180 land and line scions. Or just 180 scions in general. Weirdly might smash this list because every shot you get is going to kill someone basically. And you can still first rank fire, second rank fire, stuff like that. That could be tasty. But I think the conscripts just overwhelm you. You'd get one turn in where you'd shred loads of conscripts, and then the conscripts just get into combat with you and just start annihilating you. Now, one thing I did, because it's just so many just attacks and all that kind of stuff, I suppose then you could potentially fall back and shoot and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, maybe the scions would work better. Then maybe that's my next meme. Maybe I just take a series of meme lists to tournaments. What's the next meme list you want to see? 180 just rifle scions? I'll fucking do it. I've got the models. I'll fucking do it. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Thank you for watching. Before ending this video, I'd like to say a huge thank you to my Patreon supporters. It's thanks to Patreon supporters that, firstly, I even have the models to put this list together, and that the Great Mordian Restoration Project has borne this much fruit. So it's I'd started the Great Mordian Restoration Project with the help of the Patreon supporters. So massive thank you to them. It's thanks to the Patrons that I'm able to, buy enough movement trays to run this. Buy the trolley. I wouldn't have really been able to do it without the Patrons. So I just want to say a massive thank you to all my Patreon supporters. You have made this possible. You have made this mad thing possible, and you all deserve the credit for it. So massive thank you to them. And if you're interested in becoming a Patreon supporter, there's a link down in the description below. There's no levels, no limits, nothing like that. If you think this is worth $1, send me $1. If you think it's worth $20, send me $20. It's anything in between. I'm just grateful for any support, and that's how I run my Patreon. So massive thank you to the Patrons, massive thank you to everyone for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and of course, I'll see you guys next time.